In today's episode, we are talking about the Satanic Panic, which was a movement in the 80s and 90s, but even still today. And we're discussing how witchcraft and Christianity actually have some surprising similarities. So buckle up. You're listening to Runyons Have Layers, the podcast where two siblings explore the many layers of life and mental wellness, where vulnerability meets strength and where every shared story is a step towards self discovery. Join us as we peel back the layers. If you would like to be notified of upcoming episodes, sign up for our email list at runyonshavelayers.com. And don't forget to share this episode with a friend and leave us a rating or review.
Yeah, so the Satanic Panic was really a movement that, like we've been talking about before, is totally based in fear, just like a lot of religion and Christianity and stuff. And it's really prevalent during the 80s and 90s. And it was essentially a way for people that were scared about things that were happening in the world, things that were maybe like not going right, or there were some crimes that were happening, and they would blame it on Satan and how Satan is like taking over our children and like kind of, running amok and doing stuff in on the earth. And, a lot of people would say stuff. I mean, I didn't live during the 80s completely, but just in my research, people would say like, oh, like the rapture is happening, or these are end of days, which is a very still prevalent thing that gets said anytime. Like, like I remember when the millennia happened in 2000, and it was like, oh, the world's coming to an end because we're going to change from the 1900s to the 2000s. And like when Barack Obama got elected, there was like, oh, he's the Antichrist. Like there's a lot of still very modern examples of the Satanic Panic, so to speak. But it really came into popularity in the 80s and 90s. So yeah, and it was really just, I don't know, just a really interesting thing to like to research. What was something that you found in your research about this, Holly?
What I didn't realize is that it was really fueled by unsubstantiated claims of child abuse. And that's what kind of made it blow up. And, it affected me growing up in many ways because everything was considered satanic or evil or of the devil, music, movies, TV shows, like anything that basically all my other friends could do, I wasn't allowed to do because it was, quote, satanic. And I mean, I was terrified as a kid that I was gonna like be possessed by the devil because that was something that was like talked about. And it's just crazy to think back now, like all of these things that are so just normal part of everyday life was such a big like gray cloud, like, ooh, this is satanic. I don't know. What about you? Because we grew up about a decade apart. So
Yeah, I mean, similar. I also had the same sort of experience, especially with Halloween. It was because Halloween's our mom's birthday, so it was always like, oh, we're gonna celebrate my birthday kind of thing, and I think that was maybe an excuse to get us to not feel so bummed about it. Um, but yeah, it was a very much like, oh yeah, that's like a Satanist celebration thing, and they like it's all about demons and evil things, witchcraft and stuff. And I just remember like as I became an adult, and I felt kind of embarrassed actually, uh, whenever like I had told people, like, oh yeah, like I've never celebrated Halloween. Like that's just not a thing I did as a kid because I wasn't allowed to, because it wasn't a Christian celebration or a Christian kind of thing. It was like more of an evil type of thing. Is That's what I was told when I grew up. And so now I love celebrating Halloween because it's so much fun. I feel like I didn't really get to do that before, kind of similar to what you said in the last episode, where you feel like you're kind of like reborn, so to speak, or
Mhm.
like a teenager again. I feel like I'm a kid again sometimes when I'm in Halloween, because I actually get to dress up and like do stuff that I want to do, and like go and like explore different events that are happening around Halloween and different foods and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of fun. But in going back a little bit to what you said about it starting with child abuse, there was this interesting documentary I watched on YouTube about the McMartin preschool trial, and it was so fascinating because essentially what had happened was there was someone at this school that um, I guess was I don't know if he was doing anything to children, but he was like kind of a person of interest essentially. And the school sent this letter to the parents saying, "Hey, there's someone at the school." They're just kind of informing them of what happened. And so the children end up getting questioned by the psychologist. There was one student, and the psychologist essentially ended up coercing them into telling them what they were suggesting to them, and they took that as like, oh, they had all these suppressed memories that they're starting to remember, but essentially it was the psychologist coercing them um, into like telling them what they were kind of suggesting to them to say, without realizing it. And more of the kids that they questioned, they started essentially telling them what they wanted to hear, because they were like, if I don't tell them what they want to hear, they're not going to like let me go to recess or whatever. And
Mhm.
so they had all these kids, and even today in interviews, the children and the parents, they still believe that like there was like this tunnel that was in the bathroom that they went into, and like just like really outlandish, crazy shit that they were convinced of, and they blamed it on Satan and how Satan was like, controlling children and like doing all this really terrible stuff to children, when in reality it was just that they were convinced, that they were essentially gaslighted and
Mhm.
um, told that what they were believing, or what they experienced, was this one thing instead of just nothing, essentially,
Mhm.
because um, they didn't want to sit in that room and be questioned all day. So, and these were like kids, preschool, talking like young kids that probably can barely talk, and
Mhm.
that they just don't have the ability to actually. They don't have a logic yet to where they're like, okay, I don't really quite understand what is happening here. So, it's kind of fucked up, but that's the research that I found.
Yeah, that's crazy. In researching, I found how about the unfounded, um what's the word I'm looking for? Threat or allegations or claims of sexual abuse, but also how the media demonized, um basically everything, and it just created this panic, which that's where the term satanic panic comes from. But it created this panic among everybody, especially um like charismatic Christians, because they believe a lot in this. I mean, Christians in general believe in the spirit world, but charismatics are very much like spirit led, and so they believe in like spiritual warfare and that kind of stuff. And so it was like, that was another narrative, is that we are at war, like spiritually. Everything that you do is,
Hmm.
not has to be strategic, but like, you have to be vigilant, you have to be on guard. And I mean, my goodness, talk about, your stress response being activated all the time, being, fearful of, going to hell, and because you're not good enough, or because you've sinned, or because you've opened the door to Satan with witchcraft, or, things that are demonic. It's just
Yeah,
crazy.
and also like, just to put some context in there, like this is before the media really became about I mean, I feel like it's always been about like entertaining people and like getting people to watch, you know, their programs. But this is when cable was still around. Like this is before the internet and like things had shifted to the internet. And so like news was more, I would say newsworthy. Like I feel like news outlets were more concerned with reporting things that were actually happening and factual, and it was less sensational, and just kind of like saying whatever is going to get someone to watch their program, which I feel like is more. That's kind of like the path more that they've taken, is that it's more about entertainment than it is about news. And um, so I say that to say that I think it's an important context, because I think people back in the 80s and 90s, during that time when this was happening, you know, when you hear a news organization reporting these things, you take it a little bit more seriously than I think you would take it in this day, because it's entertainment, and it's you kind of hear crazy stuff on the news all the time now, and so yeah, I just
Yeah,
want to
and
mention
they didn't have the 24-hour news cycle like we do
right.
now. So if there were any updates or, advances in the cases or the investigations, like it wasn't like they were updated the same day or even the next day,
Yeah, because they
and
didn't have the internet, you know, like they didn't have the
mhm,
ability to like search for stuff or to send a text message to someone, and like just like the timing of everything was a lot slower. So even
mhm,
if they found something out the day they today, they wouldn't find out probably till tomorrow or the next day, depending on like where it happened, where the news organization is, who reports it first, you know. So like like you're saying, the cycle of everything was a lot slower,
mm,
and so sometimes you wouldn't hear about things, especially if it was overseas, until like a week later, sometimes, depending on what it was and how urgent it was. So, but yeah, so like the time in which this occurred, I think is really, really crucial in terms of how people are receiving the information and also how it's being reported. You know, it's like it's much more serious. Like when you look at videos back then, it's like it's very it feels a lot more serious and a lot more urgent than
mhm.
the way that they report things today. Depending on what it is, it's less of a line and more of like, this is super serious. Like you need to watch this, you know. So
Yeah.
it's just crazy how um, like how much people are manipulated by the media, and like regardless of what it's about or what time, like it's like even before TV, you know, newspapers, because like that's sometimes that's all the information you have, and you take it as sometimes you take it as fact, but I mean I think most people do, and they kind of start to shape the way that they see the world based on the way that media like frames things, and going as so far as to social media stuff now, you know, like the way that people are impacted by their social media, and still news organizations, and how that shapes your worldview around how you see things. It's pretty profound, I think, and I think a lot of people don't realize that, and I think a lot of people don't probably talk about that. But I think that's in this context, I think it's an important thing to mention, that the the things that we take in and we input, it does affect the way that we see the world and how we view certain subjects.
Yeah, and also to add to that, because they didn't have the internet and the 24-hour news cycle and all of that, they were left to their own imagination and their own devices. And then also, you know, Christians tend to surround themselves with like-minded people that believe what they believe, and so it just fuels the fire. And the feeling or the desire to pray and protect yourself and spiritual warfare and all of that. It was like a vicious cycle within Christian circles.
Yeah, I mean, and they get into a group think scenario, and then you get into
Hmm.
confirmation bias, and all these things that play into it, and then you start hearing it more, and then you start to believe it more, and you're convinced that like no, like it's kind of like a conspiracy theory,
Mhm.
essentially, you know, like people are talking about it and they're confirmed by other people who think the same thing as them, and then they just keep talking about it. Oh my god, can you believe this? And oh my god, Satan's doing this, and oh, this happened over here. And it's just like everything that happens, it becomes this like excuse that like, oh yeah, Satan is taking over the minds of our children. And you know, don't go to college because if you're educated, you know, Satan is in the schools, and he's deteriorating your mind. So you need to like
Mm.
go to a Christian school or stay in church, or don't go to school at all. Find a career that, you know, is not, you don't need an education for. I don't know. Like I've heard a mixture of that throughout my life. And it's just wild that people were so easily convinced, um, by like terrible events, you know, things that are fucked up, and things that like were not, you know, were not good things, like, you know, like, but I think that like anything that is evil by Christians often is like, oh yeah, well that's Satan, you know, that's Satan's fault. You need to blame Satan for that. And it's for everything. It's like, I don't know, it's just, it's such a blanket, like a blanket
Yeah.
excuse to
Well, because
blame
the
every single thing.
yeah. And a lot of that is because the belief of Christianity is that Satan has a plan to destroy, to steal, kill, and destroy is what, I can't remember the Bible verse, but that's what it says,
Yeah.
and that's what is believed, and so that drives so much of, um, the attitudes and the behaviors and the habits of Christians because they really believe that, they're up against the spiritual enemy.
Yeah, I forgot about that verse. But yeah, that was something that we heard a lot growing up. I feel like at least once a month, that was a verse that the pastor would quote, or during like the altar call. Um, that was something as like a way to like, I don't know, I'm not convinced, but like I just feel like there was like it was like this opposing juxtaposition of like, you
Mm.
know, this is who God is, and then this is who Satan is. Like, which one do you want? Again, going back to this dichotomy idea that I mentioned a few episodes ago, where like it was drilled into me that there's only two options. There's this really great option, or there's this other option that is much less desirable. And it was always for me this choice of like, which one do you want more? And that's just not how the world works. So
Right. Well, yeah, and it's reinforced by, the Bible because it says that, God gives it, I'm shocked at how much I can't remember about like this thing that I used to have memorized, but somewhere it says, that you have choice between life and death, which is, God or like evil or not evil, and to choose life, giving you the idea that you actually have a choice. But then, as we've talked about before, it's not really a choice because in Christianity, it's like, come as you are, but not like that, or, not with those beliefs. Eh,
yeah, yeah, and I feel like the like the more progressive that Christianity has gotten over the years, especially since internet and social media, and like I feel like it's become more progressive. Not every church is like that, but when I was growing up, you know, like it could have been the church I went to that was just, it felt so fucking old fashioned, like that it was still like in the 80s, and it was like, you know, 2000s or something. And I was like, I just don't understand. Like they didn't even have drums still. And like that they're in their worship team for like, I don't know, in certain scenarios. I don't know. There's just like, it just felt very old fashioned to me. And so that could have been why I felt like the church was a little bit more judgmental in my experience. You know, I haven't gone to church since I was an adult, so I don't know what going to church is like now, and what it was like, or what, you know, what it was for you. in terms of kind of like the come as you are sort of thing. But I just remember that there was this idea that, yeah, you can come as you are, but uh, Jesus will change you into the person that you're supposed to be, or something like that. And it
Mhm.
was always about changing you. And I think that they framed it as a way of like becoming a better person, um, which I think is, that's good. I think everyone should work to become a better person in whatever way makes sense. But it sort of was this way of like, yeah, like, I don't know, changing you to be a different person that was more acceptable is, I think, the
Mhm.
subtext of like the way that you are, like, yeah, come as you are because we want you to be a Christian, but there's an expectation that you have to act a certain way and you have to look a certain way and you have to speak a certain way. And there are certain ways that are not acceptable. And it was very clear in church that you had to perform a certain way,
Mhm.
because if you didn't, then you were a backslidden Christian, or you weren't devoted enough, or you were sinful, or whatever. There was a whole list of things that people might say, and so it felt very much like you had to come and you had to perform. You had to be in a role, and if you didn't want to fit into that, then you were like on the outside.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned backsliding because even if you know we were to say celebrate Halloween or go watch a rated R movie or listen to secular music or whatever, then that was considered like having one foot in the world and one foot in the church or with with God or Jesus or whatever, and that was considered lukewarm, which again was considered bad. And it's like
I haven't heard that term in a long
everything.
time.
I
You're a
know. Well,
lukewarm
yeah,
Christian.
yeah.
Oh my God. And that
Yeah,
takes me
you had
back
to
to
always be
like, to, what's it called? Youth group.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, that was something
And
very
then, I mean,
popular that they said in youth group.
talking about, the Bible and its crazy verses and ideologies is the verse says, "If you're lukewarm, that God will spit you out of his mouth." Like,
Yeah.
what is that?
Yeah, it's kind of, that's a
Especially
weird.
as a kid, like, thinking because we were taught the Bible was literal. So,
Hmm.
like, as we talked about before, like a fiery, hell, like a fire spinning it. I don't know. I don't know. It's crazy. I never quite understood that, but I did always feel the pressure to be, like you said, in this role and performing, and so I never did a whole lot of um, or research or exploring or anything with any other type of religions. All I ever heard was that witchcraft was satanic. That rebellion was the same as witchcraft. So I remember I was thinking about this the other day. Um, if anytime I used to talk back, which that's a whole other issue in itself, voicing your opinions and your
Oh
thoughts and
yeah.
all that, but
Man, I
that
got in
that
so
was
much trouble for
considered,
that.
yeah, that was considered rebellious, and then
Oh,
dad would
absolutely.
say, "Quit being rebellious," and it's just interesting how everything leads back to fear. Everything,
Hmm.
it's like rebellion is the sin of witchcraft. Witchcraft is evil. If I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah,
So
the way that
I
it
I
informs everything that we do in life, like something as simple as like disciplining a child that is rooted in that Christian value, and how, not really a value, but like the, I guess, principle, of using fear to like get someone to comply with what you're saying. There's so many different
mhm,
ways to parent, and that's an example of how that is like like trying to think of the right way to say, not subtext, but like the like concealed, I guess, is the only word I can think of right now in the moment. But like, it flies under the radar and you don't really notice it.
mm,
It just kind of like, it gets into your psyche and you just kind of start to mimic it, because you're hearing it over and over, you're reading it over and over again, and it
mhm,
goes into
subconsciously.
these,
Yeah.
yeah, subconscious, yeah, that's the word. And yeah, it just kind of gets into all these different avenues of your life, and it starts to inform the way that you talk and the way that you
Mhm.
interact with people.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you mentioned parenting. I thought of this earlier when we were talking about Halloween, but I chose to raise my kids differently, and I have always let them celebrate Halloween and have always let them go trick or treating and dress up, and we hand out candy and all that kind of stuff. And for a long time, even when I was still going to church, I felt um, not guilty, but like, I was lukewarm. I had one foot in and one foot out. And, that took me a while to get over and not really care about.
Yeah, I mean, just talking about witchcraft and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it took me a little while to be okay with doing Halloween type stuff, just because that's what I always heard, that like, oh, this is evil, or this is gonna conjure some sort of evil spirit, and they're gonna be attached to you, and they're gonna be like, trying to like take your mind over, and like just like really crazy stuff. Um, but like, I think the more that you are just open to different things, and it's I don't know, it's just like it's a really just weird way to like go about like using fear to
Mhm.
get kids to like believe something. And yeah, it's kind of, as an adult, it's kind of upsetting just to think of like, man, like kind of what you said before, just like how you kind of feel like you've missed out on some things, that you weren't allowed to experience things only because of the way that our parents believed, and that they thought it was evil when really it's not. It's
Mhm.
that's just a way that they believed. Um,
Yeah, I remember mom going to the library and doing research on Halloween, and she showed, I mean, I don't remember exactly what it said, but it's interesting because most of, or almost all of, the Christian holidays were pagan holidays. And, a
yeah,
lot of Christians celebrate things or demonize things that they don't even know the true history of. And I'm speaking for myself on that one because I did the same thing. And so I looked up a little bit of the history. Have you ever looked into like the history of Christianity, and not the history of Christianity, but like witchcraft, and how like certain things became demonized?
not about witchcraft specifically, but I'm interested to hear what you found.
Yeah, I just have a list here. But it's so before the 1300s, Christianity coexisted with all different kinds of magical practices. And I don't know exactly what that means, but now in the current version of the Bible, magic is not acceptable. But it became, the church cracked down on magic, and they viewed it as heretical, demonic, any of those things. And so witchcraft or magic became demonized and persecuted, and that's, the witch trials and all of that. And then when the King James Bible was published or written in 1611, that reinforced the separation between, Christian beliefs and what was, the magic beliefs or sentiment. And really that boils down to control. It boils down to fear, it boils down to control, politics, patriarchy, all of that stuff. So yeah, overall, magic went to benign and just a regular part of, everyday life, to dangerous and sinful, and opening the door to Satan to come into your life. And I mean, just based in
Yeah, well, I mean,
fear. And
if you think about like magic and all of the things that were happening during that time, like when Christianity was in its infancy, like it wasn't popular. A lot of people didn't know what it was, and I feel like because it was competing, and they wanted more followers, um, I just I feel like that was probably a potential reason why. And it's really funny because a lot of the, like we talked about praying and speaking in tongues in a previous episode, and how you mentioned how it could be a potential way of like, um, oh, what did you say, like being
meditation.
in a trance,
Yeah. Mm.
and like that's very similar to something like a shaman, that is coming, and they're doing some sort of ritual, a ritualistic
Mhm.
thing, which if you really think about uh, like speaking in tongues and like praying and or meditating, whatever you want to call it, it's all a ritual. You know, it's a practice. It's something that you do and that you do a ritual for. You might pray in the same place every time. You bow your head. You close your eyes. There's this ritualistic thing that you do when you pray, just like a shaman might go and they have a specific chant that they say. They have a specific items that they bring with them. They might burn incense. There's like, I think there's different rituals that people that they use to get them in the zone, that get feel makes them feel relaxed. They feel like they can open up to trying to um, whatever they're trying to do. If they're going to channel something, or if they're praying, if they're Christian. Like, so I think that if you look at everything equally, like they all have their ritualistic um, attributes to them, and it is very similar to the way that people do things in Christianity. But people, for some reason, they don't like those kinds of terms are not used in Christianity, like ritual and
Mhm.
um, practice, and I don't know, like things that are like more secular. I think it's less of a it. Those terms just aren't used because I think maybe they're associated to witchcraft historically.
Yeah. Yeah, and, it's funny because I remember reading or being a part of a conversation where somebody said that Christianity and witchcraft are very similar, and Catholicism, because of the rituals and you know, the the symbolism of water, like for baptism or holy water, and then the blood, like the blood of Christ, and like all of those things, saying the rosary, daily rituals, like you were talking about, praying, devotion,
Holy
all that kind
water.
of stuff. Yeah, is the same in Christianity. It's the same act, but yet because Christians think that they're, I don't want to say better than other people, but their way to believe is the right way, everything
Mhm.
else is demonized. And that includes all other religions, not just witchcraft.
And
Because all
religions that and Christian, like different sectors of Christianity as well, like
Mhm.
Catholicism and Protestantism, and even like non-denominational or Baptist or whatever. Like it doesn't matter. Every single setting I've been in within Christianity, they all think that their church is the right way, or that their like sector is right. Like Baptists think that they have the right view, and Protestants or Pentecostals or um, non-denominational. Like it is crazy. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't even have to be a different religion. It can just be like a different type of church, and they feel like, oh yeah, like they have it wrong over there. You should stay here. And it's all about like selling and converting
Mhm.
someone and be like, yeah, you need to come to our church where you can get the true experience of what it's like to be a Christian. So
Right. Yeah. I find it funny that one of the things that stands out to me the most is, prayer is a huge, huge part of being a Christian, and praying is essentially the same as casting a spell. And,
hmm
and of course I'm laughing because I didn't realize that either. But, it's like when you
yeah,
actually break it down, and when you, actually have some independent thought and kind of remove yourself from the bubble, it seems very obvious. But when you're in it and surrounded by it, um, you don't, at least for me, I thought the same thing. I felt pity toward other people who, didn't know the truth or didn't believe the right way that I did. Um,
yeah. I
Man,
mean,
that's
even
crazy to think about.
whenever you're in church, and I mean, I've heard the pastor say stuff like, I cast you out, Satan, like get out
Mhm.
of here, like just like stuff like that. Like that is, like you're saying, a spell. Like you're essentially praying that, whatever, like the words that you're saying is going to have some sort of effect on the devil, and that the devil will like, be able to not stay within the confines of the church, or to leave someone else alone, or whatever, like especially if you go to like a prayer night type of thing, and someone is like, oh, I have this illness. Like I think of Benny Hinn all the time,
Mhm.
and not all the time. I don't think of him all the time, but like right now I'm thinking of Benny Hinn in this particular context. That'd be really weird, right? Um,
Yeah.
and it's like, and if no one knows who Benny Hinn is, you need to Google or YouTube Benny Hinn and see like the craziness that happens. Like he just like hits someone on the forehead and they just like fall out, you know?
Hmm.
And like he has this like supernatural power that God is just like giving him, and he has the Holy Spirit to just heal people and do all this crazy stuff. And there's all kinds of different rabbit holes you can go down in YouTube about mega churches and the way that people are doing things and they're corrupt and making. There's a whole slew of things that we're going to go into, especially in church finances, about that, I'm sure. But it's just it's really interesting in this context to think about people like Benny Hinn. Or there was another really popular evangelist before him or after him. I can't remember the name, but it came up a lot in church when I was in church. But anyways, Benny Hinn is the name I can think of right now. Where they essentially they're using some sort of spell, or they're doing some sort of like witchcrafty type thing, but it's framed in this church Christianity bubble, and it's accepted because it's God that's doing it. It's not a witch or the devil that's doing it. So it's okay if God is doing it, but if the devil is doing it, then it's evil and you shouldn't believe in it. But it's literally the same fucking thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the history part of it's really super um I think important to remember. And I think I mentioned this before, but I think it's a lot of people don't remember that the history of like how Christianity got here, and all of the all of the things that went on before we got here in present day with Christianity, you know, like just how governments used Christianity, and they use it to manipulate people and to control people. And similarly, like there is a history to this satanic panic type thing, and how religion was used to control the way that people lived their life and how they saw things and how they treated different things. So I think it's really important to always come back to that, and to just to remind people that, you know, there is a history of this where it doesn't always come off as, you know, super holy and it's perfect and
Hmm.
it's totally good, and you know, why would God do this if this happened or whatever. But it's like people use religion for evil things all the time. I mean, that's talking about cults. Again, I cannot wait till
Hmm.
we get to that culty vibes episode, because like talk about using Christianity for something that's evil and fucked up, and that people go through traumatic experiences because they're following someone that is essentially, they're saying that they're God's messenger or whatever, and people believe it, you know, and they
Hmm.
do it because they don't want to be a lukewarm Christian. They don't want to have the doubt. All the things that we've mentioned before, they do it because they feel like that's what they're supposed to do, because that's what they're
Right.
taught to do. And but talk about people doing things for evil reasons, and
Yeah.
good God. So what about some, I think we talked a little bit about, I'm just looking at my notes here. Talked about some similarities, a little bit. Yeah, prayer and spell casting. We talked about fasting. What about fasting?
Well, in both, well, in all different kinds of religion, because witchcraft is considered a religion. Fasting is used to purify themselves, their mind, to enhance, to be able to hear more from the Lord or hear clearer. So, like, enhance spiritual receptivity, and all different religions use that. But in Christianity, fasting is like this. It's to get closer to the Lord, or to deny your flesh, basically, is
Mhm.
what they
Yeah,
believe. But it's
which I
everything.
never understood that.
Yeah, me either. Well, because again, it goes to, us not being good enough and always looking toward God to, uh, you know, purify our thoughts, control our thoughts, because we were supposed to be, righteous and pure all the time. And that, like you said, that's just not how life works.
Hmm.
It's a constant feeling of I can't measure up and I can't be good enough. And fasting was supposed to help with some of that. But one of the things that I thought was interesting was divination, which
Hmm.
is,
Yeah.
like interpreting dreams, which is in the Bible, using different tools, which like, there's like tarot cards and uh, crystals and pendulums and things like that. And in the Bible, they had all kinds of tools that they used and went to see psychics. They didn't call them psychics. I can't remember what they're called in the Bible. Um,
Oracle.
but maybe, but I mean, it's like all of this stuff is also, most of it is in the Old Testament, which then they claim, oh, well, that's just history. That's how it used to be. That's not for today. And
Right.
it's just, it's interesting how when it doesn't support their views, it's, oh, that's the Old Testament. That's the old covenant.
That's the
That's why
Old
Jesus
Testament.
came.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. Yeah, that was back in the day. Things have
Hmm.
changed since then. Even though the New Testament was written like not that much longer after the Old Testament,
Right.
still way back in the day, you know?
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah. And then
it's
also like spirit guides, the Christians believe in the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit
mhm.
directs you and comforts you and all of that. And really what it boils down to is that in that small still voice, that inner voice, is your intuition. I mean, that's
Yeah,
really
exactly.
all it is. It's
Yeah.
not, you know.
Yeah, some people's intuition is just a lot stronger than other people's.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, also divination, besides tarot cards, I think, I don't know if like astrology is, do you think astrology would be considered divination?
Probably.
Like
Yeah.
using, I mean, because you are using like different, um, I mean, I don't really know what to call that. I mean, you're using something that's like beyond, like you're using something to give you guidance, so to speak.
Mhm.
Because I think that's probably, I use that a lot just for my own life, just for guidance and direction, and just to kind of gauge where I am sometimes. And so yeah, I've used tarot cards a bit, but I haven't used them a whole lot. Someone, it might have been you actually, that told me that you're supposed to be gifted tarot cards. Is that something you told me?
No, no, but I have heard that too, and it's not. I mean, that's not true.
Yeah, because I'm like, every time I look at tarot cards, I'm like, oh, I wonder if I should just ask someone to get me tarot cards instead of getting it myself. But then I'm like, well, I may not like them, so yeah, I don't know. I was just so I haven't gotten tarot cards. I've been looking for a little bit, but I haven't because of that reason. I keep forgetting. Or I keep every time I go to buy them, I keep remembering that in my head. I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this, but like, it probably doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. What about things like blessing people? Like, bless you. Like, just
Yeah, it's
things.
the same thing, They'll different religions say it in different ways, but it's the same thing, like, "Bless you." I remember, this one lady at one of our, old churches that we went to in Arkansas would just come up to me and be like, "Bless you," and I'm like, "I don't even know what to say to that." Like, "Thank you."
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Something that really bothered me a lot whenever I was first leaving religion was, especially when mom would tell me, got really defensive where she would say, "I'm praying for you, Brian," and I always took that as, I'm praying for you because you're not going down the path that I agree with, and I want you to come back to Christianity. So I'm praying that you'll find your way and you come back. So I used to get really defensive about that, and a little frustrated. But now it doesn't bother me so much because I don't care anymore. But um, I feel like that's her way of like thinking about me and like, doing something positive. So I'm like, at least she cares enough to pray and to think about me and to send me some good energy or whatever, whether it does something or not. It doesn't bother me so much anymore, but that was something that a lot of people would say when I was in church, like, oh yeah, like I'll pray for you, or I'm praying for you, or something like that, because that was
Mm.
supposed to do something for you, but
Well,
essentially I
because
think
the
it's just
belief
that, like,
yeah, the belief is that you're lost and going to hell, and so they're praying for you because they're concerned about your soul, and,
yeah.
um, it's whatever.
What is this Reiki thing? I've
Oh,
never heard of
Reiki?
Reiki. Reiki, yeah.
Yeah, it's a spiritual healing, um, tool, energy healing that, I mean, there's still studies going, but there are, medical establishments that actually use it. And it's funny how it's like demonized as, witchcraft, but it's, being researched scientifically, and also specifically in the Pentecostal and charismatic um, parts of Christianity, they do pretty much the same thing: the laying on of hands and speaking in tongues and Reiki. Um, it can be hands on or hands off, but it's essentially the same thing. You set an intention, focus your energy, and you use your hands, and it's literally the same thing as praying for someone, laying your hands on them, and
Huh.
but the
Interesting.
the difference the difference there is that you are with Reiki, um, using your energy, and with Christianity, you're doing things in the name of Jesus, like that he's
Right.
working through you.
Yeah.
And, that's interesting. That's interesting to me how, um, you know, Christians believe that Jesus lives in us, in our heart, that he works through us, all those kinds of things. Yet any other kind of spiritual, uh, I don't know, possession is I don't know, demonized. It's witchcraft. It's like, it's the
Hmm.
same thing. Not that I want to like
Right.
invite some random spirit inside, but you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. You're essentially like if you look at it, it's kind of like you're possessed. If Jesus is inside of you and he's in
Yeah,
your body, like you're essentially possessed by Jesus. Like
right.
Christians wouldn't frame it that way, but like that's
Oh no.
essentially what it is. Like if a spirit comes into your body, then you're possessed by demons. But if
Mhm.
Jesus is in you, you're not possessed. You're living in the blood of
Right,
Jesus or whatever. Um,
right.
which is such a
Well,
weird
yeah,
phrase to
because
use.
I know because the way that they view it is that's the holy way, the righteous way, the only right way. And, if we were having this conversation with a Christian, or they were listening to this, they probably already have checked out and been like, "Oh, well, they just don't understand from our point of view. They don't understand the truth. They don't understand." And it's funny because, like, I remember thinking that. I remember thinking, oh, they like, yeah, they say that, but they don't really understand. And the funny part is I was the one that didn't really understand.
Yeah, and that goes to like a very like conspiracy theory type of mental state. I feel like when people believe in a conspiracy theory, they are so convinced that what that theory is completely true in fact. And when someone challenges it, they're like, "Oh, well, you just don't get it. You just don't see it. You don't
Mhm.
see the way that I see it." And I wonder if that's. I mean, I don't think that everyone who is a Christian is a conspiracy theorist, but I feel like often it's a lot of people who believe in conspiracy theorists are people who are Christians, because it's
Mhm.
it's such a similar framing for conspiracy theorists and people who are willing to just believe whatever. I could be wrong about that, and I could be way off base saying that, but um, in my experience, I feel like that is a pretty frequent tendency, that people who are Christians or believe in Christianity often are the people who are the ones who are willing to sign up for the next conspiracy theorist, like flat Earth
Mhm.
or QAnon or whatever, fill in the blank, this satanic
Yeah.
panic. And
QAnon is
I,
what I was thinking because they think they think that, Satan is using the government. And I mean, that's a whole different argument whether the government is on our side or not.
Yeah,
That's different. But
Satanic
that
Panic, 2024.
I know, right? That Satan is infiltrating the government and using people and the Hollywood elite, and I'm not saying that there isn't abuse, but in the way that they are talking about, like drinking children's blood and like all this kind of stuff, it's like
Fucking
it is. You're
crazy.
right. I know it's the satanic panic of, well, started really in 2020 with the pandemic.
Yeah, right. But just like the fact that, so I'm just looking this up on Wikipedia, so take it or leave it based on that. But it says it's a far right American political conspiracy theory and political movement that originated in 2017. So even before
Oh,
2020,
oh,
it
nice.
centers on fabricated claims made by an anonymous individual known as Q, and claims to have relayed and developed by Facebook, blah blah blah. And yeah, it says the core belief is that a cable, I don't know, or a cabal, CABAL,
Cabal.
of cabal,
It's cabal.
a
Yeah.
cabal of satanic cannibalistic child molesters is operating a global child sex trafficking ring that conspired against Donald Trump. Like that's their core belief.
Mhm.
And I just like, you read that and you're like, are you serious? Like, do you actually believe that that is what's happening in this world? Like, actually, you believe this? And like, I don't know how, like, what was the pitch to get someone to believe this? You know, like, what video was it? What post was it? I don't even know, but the fact that someone can read something or get sucked into something so crazy blows my mind. I don't
Mhm.
like, what world do you live in? You know?
I was in Facebook groups about QAnon. I wasn't like fully like conspiracy theorist, but I was like was what I considered at the time keeping my mind open to all possibilities. And after a while, I was just like, this is just way too extreme. Like I don't the logical part of my brain couldn't reconcile like what they were saying with what was actually happening. Um and a lot of people get sucked in because, a lot of the churches that they go to, their leadership believes the same thing. And so it's reinforced,
Right. And then
in
they
the
like,
circles that they're in.
they use their megaphone to
Mhm,
like make it even more. And then if the pastor believes it, then the church feels like, oh, well, this is a man of God. And so I should
mhm,
listen to what he's saying because he has this giant megaphone that he's using to people.
mhm.
And yeah. I mean, I
Yeah,
think
like
the whole the political thing of really is what influences more than anything, I feel like.
oh,
But
for sure. A lot of what I heard, recently, or what I call recent in the last 5 or 10 years, is that, Satan is coming for our children, and specifically with the quote gay agenda and,
trans,
trans
all that
rights
stuff.
and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And it's just, I just don't believe that there's some evil force out there trying to convert my kids, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's just like another thing that people don't know about, that they're unsure about. And I mean, I was joking when I said the Satanic Panic of 2024, but I mean, it really is, I feel like, happening in a different way. There's a different
Mhm,
cycle now, but it's still happening today where people are using these these excuses or ways of describing things that is like, it's in the context or in the framing of, yeah, Satan is taking over the kids, there, Satan is deteriorating the minds of our kids. And now everyone is like, I mean, I've heard people say like, oh well, they're just trans because that's popular right now.
mhm.
Like, what
It's
what
like it's a phase type of a thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a phase. Or like, oh well, it's so popular now that like everyone they're just doing it, it's a fad. And I'm like, are
Mhm,
you serious? Like, do you know how disrespectful that is to say that to someone? And
mhm.
like, why would
Not only
someone
that,
go
but
through all of this trauma at
mhm.
school and at home and or online everywhere just because they think it's cool? Like, it's not cool to go through that kind of stuff. So like, why would they
Yeah.
do that?
Yeah, and it's funny because it is different than it was in the 90s, but yet it's also still the same because a lot of the underlying fears are about sexual abuse, like the
Hmm.
ritualistic, cannibalization and trafficking of kids, and how they think that the gay
True.
agenda or
That's a good point.
LGBTQ movement is grooming. So a lot of it still has the sexual abuse undertones. In
Yeah,
addition to, I don't.
bathrooms.
Yeah, yeah.
God damn.
I don't hear so much. I don't hear so much anymore about like movies and music, and but of course I'm removed from those kinds of opinions and things like that. But yeah, the whole thing with Satan using drag queens to groom our kids, or
Yeah. Uh,
stuff like that, when I guarantee you they don't know a drag queen personally, or they've
yeah, and
never
it's just like
even.
it's because they don't know anything about it and they don't want to learn anything about it. They don't have an open mind to go have a conversation with someone who has a different view to them because they feel like, "Oh, I don't know what that is and that's not what I'm used to." So
Mhm.
they just say, "Oh, that must be evil." And it's like if you just had an open mind and you just talk to people, like we're all human, we all have the same kind of issues. So like I just it just I don't understand it. And I mean I was probably that way whenever I was younger. I mean I know that I definitely was for a period of time. But like the more that you let yourself just be open and see people as fellow humans, like it's a lot easier to go through life instead of feeling like you have to prove something to someone or that you have
Right.
to prove that someone is wrong. Like
Hmm.
just let people be who they are, and it shouldn't matter what they
Yeah.
believe or who they love or the way that they want to dress. Like none of that should matter very much because ultimately it doesn't even affect most people, like
Right. It doesn't
yeah,
affect their lives, and it's
yeah, you might
interesting
be
that they
uncomfortable.
right. Yeah, and it's interesting that they conveniently disregard or don't even consider all the research that supports, that the mental health of kids is better and there's less suicides and less issues when they are supported. Whether or not you think it's, quote unquote, a phase or not, what harm does it do in supporting someone? Well, I mean, of course, Christians think that they're supporting mental illness and that they're supporting, Satan, and it's just I, I don't have any words.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really get it. I think it really comes down to people feel too uncomfortable and they don't know how to deal with that uncomfortability. And so instead of dealing with it, they're just going to avoid it and they're going to just keep doing what they know and whatever makes them feel comfortable. Because ultimately it comes down to, um, yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. I feel like we should save this for our LGBTQ episode because we're going to go into a whole a whole slew of this stuff, I'm sure,
Mm.
and we'll take some more examples and do some more research on this. But I think it's just important to. I think that like tying, not really tying because we're not trying to thread anything, but I think just um, like acknowledging that this satanic panic, quote unquote, is actually manifesting in a new way. And I didn't really
Hmm.
consider it until you mentioned it. It is still connected to children and like the sexuality and abuse kind of thing. Because, like we mentioned at the beginning of this episode, it was about the example I used, the McMartin preschool thing. That was about like like children being molested in a preschool, and now, fast forward in 2024, we have a lot of these issues, and even before 2024, a lot of issues surrounding children who are, being trans and things like that. So um, I think that that is a very like, it's a profound connection between those two different periods of time, and seeing that arc is still there,
Hmm.
and um, and it will continue to be. I'm sure there's other examples of even before the 80s of this kind of thing manifesting, and
Sure.
it wasn't as public as it was in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, that's true.
But I'm just looking at my notes here. We talked about Halloween. We talked about movies and music. Yeah, I think I think that's probably enough for today. I think that we've covered a lot about the Satanic Panic and kind of its effects on lives and like just different things that we've like grew up with and had to deal with. And I'm excited to get into some more of the culty vibes. Like I mentioned before, definitely check that episode out whenever it comes out. We're still figuring when that's going to happen, but also we'll dive into the LGBTQ plus
Hmm.
issues that we've sort of started to get into. So we have so many more topics. Please stick around for the entire season if you want to find out more about just our personal opinions on things. Yeah, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us. Thank you for joining us and peeling back the layers today. If you enjoyed this podcast and you'd like to support it, please share it with others and please leave a review, like, subscribe, all that jazz. For more information about us, you can visit runionshavelayers.com, where you can find how to get connected with us and find resources mentioned in our episodes. Bye for now.